It waits behind your smile, that quiet weight no one else can see. It is patient, practiced, familiar. It knows when to appear and when to vanish. You have carried it for so long that it almost feels like part of your identity. The world calls it composure. You call it survival. But beneath the still surface, something trembles, small, persistent, and unhealed. It is not sadness. It is something deeper, quieter, harder to name. It is the ache of keeping everything together when everything inside wants to fall apart. It is the discipline of pretending, the invisible performance you repeat every day. The act becomes so refined that even you forget where the mask ends, and you begin. It feels easier that way. Safer, quieter. You wake up and put on your calm face like armor. You move through the day as though nothing touches you. You nod, smile, agree, deflect. When people ask, "Are you okay?" you answer automatically, "I am fine," because you know that the truth would make the air heavier, the silence awkward, the eyes pitying. And yet, somewhere inside, you wonder when pretending became easier than feeling. You remember faintly the version of you that used to speak honestly, the one who cried without guilt, who laughed without restraint. Now you measure everything, every expression, every tone, every pause. You do not lie, you just hide. They say people who seem the strongest are often the most fragile, but that is not quite true. You are not fragile. You have learned how to carry your breaking points with grace. You have turned collapse into choreography, fear into quiet poise. The world never sees the cracks, only the symmetry. They watch you and think, you are doing great. They compliment your resilience, your stability, your maturity. They do not see how often you retreat into silence, how often you swallow your words before they reach your tongue, how many times you almost said, "I am tired," but smiled instead. You tell yourself it is easier this way, because people tire quickly of sadness, because your pain feels like an inconvenience in their bright rooms, because you fear that if you ever truly let it out, it will never stop. It begins to whisper, that quiet voice in your head. It tells you that you are being dramatic, that you should be grateful, that others have it worse, that you are lucky, that your feelings do not deserve space. So you bury them a little deeper, and every time you do, the soil gets heavier. You become skilled at distraction. Work becomes your sanctuary. Productivity your disguise. You chase achievements not out of joy but out of necessity, because stillness feels dangerous. It gives the ache too much room to breathe. You tell yourself that busy means fine, that exhaustion means progress. But late at night, when everything quiets down, the truth returns like an echo. They would never guess how often you break inside silence. They would never imagine how hard it is to maintain that steady tone when your voice wants to tremble. They think peace surrounds you, but they do not hear the storm beneath your ribs. They think you are distant, but it is not distance, it is defense. You are not cold, you are protecting what little warmth you have left. And then you realize something. The mask that once shielded you now keeps you from breathing. You have worn it for so long that it has fused to your skin. You cannot tell if people love you or the version of you you have built. You fear that if they saw what lies beneath, they would wilt. It hurts, that kind of invisibility, to be seen and unseen at the same time. To be admired for a strength that was born from loneliness. To be celebrated for calmness when it is really suppression. You wish someone would look past the surface, see the tremor in your hands, and whisper, "You do not have to be okay." But they rarely do. They are too used to your stillness, too comforted by your predictability. People need your steadiness. It makes them feel safe. So you keep playing your part, quietly, flawlessly. You have become their constant, their mirror of control. It watches from the corners of your life, this quiet sorrow. It feeds on unspoken truths, on smiles that cost too much. It grows in the silence between "I am fine" and "help me." And when no one is watching, it exhales, softly, like smoke. You breathe it in, mistaking it for peace. There is an art to appearing unbroken. It is not deception, it is devotion. A devotion to stability, to dignity, to survival. You learned it the hard way. The world rarely rewards vulnerability. So you built a home inside restraint. You turned your pain into something polite, something that could exist among others without discomfort. But even art can tire of its own beauty. Even stillness begins to ache for movement. There comes a moment when pretending no longer feels noble, when silence stops protecting you and starts imprisoning you. You do not know when that moment will arrive, but you feel it approaching, soft, inevitable, and necessary. Because it knows the mask, the ache, the silence. It knows that truth cannot stay buried forever. It knows that pretending is only peace until it is poison. And it knows that one day, when you finally whisper the truth, you will feel lighter, not weaker. It grows restless inside you, the quiet ache that has outlived its purpose. It no longer hides politely behind your routines. It lingers in your thoughts, interrupts your rest, and hums beneath your skin like a low vibration that never ends. It is not loud, not dramatic, but constant, like a background noise you can never turn off. And sometimes, you wonder if this stillness you protect so carefully is just another form of pain disguised as peace. You begin to notice how often you feel disconnected, even in familiar places. Conversations blur, laughter feels rehearsed, smiles no longer reach your eyes. You stand among people yet feel slightly elsewhere, like a ghost in your own life. It is strange how emptiness can exist inside abundance. You have everything they say should make you happy, and yet something remains missing. A pulse, a spark, a sense of aliveness. You try to trace it to understand where the numbness began. Perhaps it started when you learned that honesty could make people uncomfortable, when your sadness was met with advice instead of presence, when your vulnerability became a burden others wanted to fix rather than hold. So you adapted. You learned to edit your emotions before they ever reached the surface. You turned your truth into fragments that could be tolerated. They say you should talk about your feelings, but they rarely mean it. They prefer the version of you that listens more than speaks, that nods, that forgives, that absorbs. They say you are strong, but what they mean is silent. They say you are composed, but what they mean is contained. They say you are wise, but what they mean is numb. Because people misunderstand calmness, they mistake it for clarity when it is really exhaustion. They think stillness means acceptance, when it often means surrender, and they call it maturity, the ability to suppress what hurts until it looks poetic. You tell yourself that you are okay, but sometimes your body disagrees. Your chest tightens for no reason. Your hands tremble when you try to rest. You wake up tired even after sleeping. It is not weakness, it is memory. The body remembers every truth the mind tries to forget. It does not matter how convincing your performance is. The nervous system knows when you are lying to yourself. Every smile that hides pain leaves a trace. Every "I am fine" becomes a scar on the inside of your voice. And eventually, your body begins to speak the language your mouth refuses to. Headaches, fatigue, disinterest. The silent protests of a soul that has been told to stay quiet. They would not understand if you explained it. They would ask what is wrong, and you would not know how to answer, because nothing is wrong, not visibly. And yet something feels misaligned, as if life has become too small for the size of your silence. You have outgrown your disguise, but fear keeps you wearing it. You fear the exposure that truth demands. Because to say, "I am not fine," is to risk being misunderstood, pitied, or abandoned. So you keep the ache contained, like water behind glass, visible, but unreachable. People admire the reflection without realizing the depth it hides. Sometimes you catch glimpses of yourself in others. You see the same careful smiles, the same polite nods, the same rehearsed calmness. It comforts and devastates you at once, because you realize how many of us are quietly pretending, not to deceive the world, but to survive within it. They too have learned that silence keeps relationships intact, that sadness makes rooms colder, that vulnerability is expensive in a world that trades in distractions. So everyone smiles a little wider, talks a little faster, and hides a little deeper. We all become actors in a play about being fine. You start to resent the word fine. It feels like an insult now, a dismissal of something sacred and complex. To say you are fine is to bury entire stories under a single syllable. You are not fine. You are surviving gracefully. You are enduring beautifully. But you are not fine. It whispers again that old truth you try to silence. It tells you that pretending has kept you safe, but also small. It tells you that peace built on repression cannot last, that the self you protect from pain is also the self that longs for joy. You cannot feel one without the capacity for the other. And so slowly the descent begins, not into darkness, but into honesty. You begin to see your reflection without filters, raw, unedited, uncertain. You begin to notice how your emotions speak in quiet gestures, a sigh, a hesitation, a look away. You realize how much energy it takes to hide your own humanity. They will not notice your unraveling, because it will not be dramatic. It will happen in small, almost invisible ways. You stop forcing conversations. You withdraw from noise. You start telling smaller truths, then bigger ones. You begin to choose solitude over company that demands pretending. At first it will feel lonely, because for years you have equated connection with performance. Without the mask, everything feels raw, too bright, too sharp. But slowly, something shifts. You begin to meet yourself. Not the version others find admirable, but the one who trembles, doubts, and still shows up. It watches you quietly. This descent, it does not judge, it does not rush. It knows that healing often begins with falling apart. That authenticity begins where control ends. And that beneath all your layers of composure lies something tender. Not broken, just hidden. It is the part of you that still feels deeply, despite exhaustion. The part that wants to be held without being fixed. The part that still believes that being known is worth the risk of being seen. It has waited patiently beneath all the pretending. Now it simply asks for space to breathe, to exist, to speak. And when you finally let it, you will notice the silence feels different. No longer heavy, no longer cold. It becomes gentle, almost sacred. The kind of quiet that heals instead of hides. Because sometimes dissent is not destruction. It is the way truth returns home. It begins quietly, not as a revelation, but as a soft shift. The silence that once felt suffocating starts to feel spacious. The stillness that once trapped you begins to hold you. It is the same world, the same body, the same story, but something subtle has changed. The pretending begins to loosen its grip, and you finally breathe without apology. It feels unfamiliar at first. Honesty does. After all, you have spent years mastering the art of restraint. Used to believe that showing emotion meant losing control. Now you begin to see that expression is not weakness, it is release. The tears that once felt dangerous now feel cleansing. You realize that pain, when faced with gentleness, dissolves into understanding. You start noticing the smallest things. How the air feels when you breathe deeply. How your chest softens when you do not suppress your words. How light falls differently on your face when you are not trying to perform. It is as though life was always waiting for you to stop pretending so it could finally meet you. You stop saying "I am fine," not because everything is perfect, but because the phrase no longer fits. It feels dishonest to compress your complexity into a polite answer. So instead, you begin to say, "I am learning," or "I am healing," or sometimes simply, "I do not know." And that truth, small as it sounds, begins to rebuild you from the inside out. They notice the change, though they cannot name it. Your voice becomes slower, your eyes softer, your silence less guarded. They sense something new in you, not fragility, but freedom. And yet, not everyone understands. Some drift away, unable to face the version of you that no longer performs. That is the cost of truth. You lose the comfort of pretending, but you gain the peace of being real. You begin to see that everyone carries a mask of their own. They hide their fear behind humor, their sadness behind anger, their loneliness behind noise. You stop judging them for it, because you understand now, pretending was never malice, it was instinct. It was the only way any of us knew how to survive a world that confuses vulnerability with weakness. The world does not change when you stop pretending, but your relationship to it does. The noise feels less personal, the chaos less consuming. You learn to walk through it without losing yourself. You no longer rush to please or to prove, you simply exist, steady, observant, whole. And slowly, connection begins to return. Not the shallow kind built on shared distractions, but the quiet kind, the kind that feels like recognition. You meet people who do not flinch when you speak your truth, who listen without the need to fix you, who see your silence and do not mistake it for absence. With them you begin to unlearn loneliness. It surprises you how healing does not come from grand gestures, but from moments of gentleness that seem almost invisible. A hand that lingers for a second longer. A friend who says, "Take your time." A night where you finally sleep without rehearsing tomorrow. That is how life starts to stitch you back together. Thread by thread, quietly, faithfully. They call it growth, but it feels more like return. Return to yourself. To the child who once felt everything without shame. To the part of you that believed love was not something to earn, but something to share. You realize that pretending was not your enemy. Fear was, and fear dissolves not through strength, but through understanding. You begin to redefine strength. It is no longer the absence of emotion, but the presence of it. It is not endurance at all costs, but awareness of when to rest. It is not pretending to be invulnerable, but choosing to stay open even after pain. Strength is quiet now, it whispers instead of shouts. And you, who once mastered the art of appearing unbroken, now learn the beauty of being whole, cracks and all. You no longer rush to hide your imperfections, you trace them like constellations. You begin to see that every fracture has let in light. You realize you were never unworthy, you were simply unseen. Now, you see yourself, and that is enough. It stands beside you, the truth you once avoided. It no longer threatens you, it steadies you. It has watched your descent and your awakening, and now it whispers something simple yet sacred. You have survived your silence, because that is what healing really is. Not forgetting, not erasing, but remembering without collapsing. You remember who you were before the mask, and who you became beneath it. You forgive yourself for needing it, and you thank yourself for letting it go. And in that forgiveness you find a new kind of peace, the kind that does not depend on illusion. You start walking differently now, slower, more deliberate. Not every step is easy, but every step is true. And even when the world demands your old calm, your old restraint, you do not yield. Because you have learned that pretending is comfort without depth, and truth, though heavy, is freedom with weight. They will ask what changed. You will not have an easy answer. Because awakening is not a single moment. It is a series of quiet decisions. To stay when you want to flee. To speak when you want to silence yourself. To choose authenticity, even when it costs admiration. And one evening, as you sit alone, not lonely, just still, you will understand what all this was for. You will see that the mask was never a mistake. It was a bridge. It protected you until you were ready to live without it. You will thank it, release it, and finally step into yourself, unguarded, human, alive. It ends where it began, in silence. But this time, the silence is not heavy. It is vast, peaceful, infinite. It is no longer what hides you. It is what holds you. And in that quiet, you hear it, the faint sound of truth breathing again. Because pretending was never your nature. It was only your armor. And now at last, you have remembered what it feels like to live without one. You were never meant to seem fine. You were meant to be real. Subscribe for more reflections like this.